Welcome to the Highland Park Library presents Library in Your Living Room. I'm Callie, a youth services librarian, and I'm here to talk to you about graphic novels and comics for parents. So, are graphic novels bad for my kid? Will he ever read real books? How do I get her to read something other than comics? These are common concerns parents have, and they're absolutely valid. But I'm here to make the case for graphic novels, to show you some stellar titles that we have here at the library and let you know how they can help your child learn, grow, and enjoy reading. Okay, first off, words are not the only way to literacy. So if you're kind of freaking out about what your kid is reading, just try to breathe that in like your mantra. Words are not the only way to literacy. There are different kinds of literacy. And like it or not, our education systems are built on a preference for print literacy. So that is what gets taught in schools. And we all kind of have a little bit of a bias towards print reading, like that's the best way to do things. But visual literacy is just as important, especially in our current world, which is flooded with social media. There is so much that children and adults have to decode about our world through images and text and how they work together. Reading pictures is an actual skill, one that we all need to hone. Some graphic novels don't even have words, and that doesn't mean they're any less have reading as an activity. So this is an example of needing to read pictures. You can't just flip through this book and enjoy the images like you would maybe in a magazine or something like that. You have to read each individual picture to discern what's going on in the story. And it might take you a lot longer to read this than it would, say, just a coffee table book where you're just looking at beautiful images. There's definitely a sequence to it and there's a story. Another example of a book that utilizes images and reading images is Zenobia. So this is an award-winning book that originally was written in Denmark and has been translated into English. This one uses very little words. It's mostly pictures and panels that show different images. You have to read the images and the limited amount of text that it contains to get the story. So it's not going to be something you read really quickly. It's going to take a little bit of time and it's going to slow your child down. This one is written for kind of a middle school or teen audience. It is about Amina, who is a Syrian refugee, and this is about her refugee experience and the story of her travels. The content for that isn't going to be babyish. It's not going to be for small children. Just because it has pictures doesn't mean it's for younger audiences. It has some mature content in it. So just like regular books, there is a spectrum of quality. In the library, we have a lot of graphic books that are professionally reviewed. Some have won awards and are really high literary quality. We also have items that are not as highbrow, but that doesn't mean they're any less important for a child's enjoyment and reading journey. However, children generally don't have as much trouble finding those books as they do some that are maybe a little harder to get into or find. So some items that have definite literary merit that we have here in the library. This is a new one, Twins. It's by Varian Johnson and Shannon Wright. This is just a story of Maureen and Francine, who are twins, and their middle school experience. And there's a significant amount of reading that has to happen in here, in addition to reading the pictures. So the language isn't necessarily written at a lower reading level or anything like that, but it's easier for a larger spectrum of readers to get the story from words and pictures. Another example of great literary merit are the Hazardous Tales of Nathan Hale. This is the newest one, Major Impossible. This delves into history. These are extremely popular items. Each one of these books is about a different point in history, and it gives some kind of historical fiction in a very different format. Sometimes kids aren't super thrilled about historical fiction. This is an example of a book that flips the script on that. So a lot of books that are being published right now have some crossover value. Many books have a graphic novel version, and the reverse is sometimes true. The graphic novel gets written first, and then it's turned into a novel. So if your child really enjoys reading a graphic format, you can also try to interest them in the print-based versions. It can extend the life of a particular story if they can enjoy it in multiple formats. A great example of this is The Graveyard Book, based on the Neil Gaiman book of the same title. This is, I would say, for kind of a middle school audience mostly. I would recommend it for grades 5 and up. And similarly with the actual story. This is a great kind of fantasy, light horror, I would say. And it's pretty dense in terms of what you're reading in the actual story. Another one that I have for you is The Crossover. This was originally written as a book in verse, so kind of in a poetry format, and it's about basketball. And I don't know about you guys, but I've known some kids who only want to read books about basketball, period. That's all. So if you know a child like that, this would be a great option for grades 5 and up, because it's about basketball. And there is another book that you can hand them. If they like the graphic novel, hand them the novel in verse, and vice versa. This can really extend the life of what your child is reading. They only read one book and they only liked one book. Now they like 2 books. Perfect. This one has images that you need to read in there, as well as a fair amount of text on some of these pages. It can get a little dense. And the story really lends itself to this format as well. This one is not an exact kind of replica of Little Women, but it's kind of a retelling, a modern retelling of that story. It's called Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. And it's kind of a new take on what that family could look like. You look inside, there's definitely some text-heavy portions. And if your kid likes this, say, oh, it was based on Little Women, and then hand them that. It's kind of a way of getting more for your money in terms of what your child might be interested in reading. If you still want your child to read more traditional novels, you can think of it kind of like a compromise. There's a growing subset of books that I would classify as hybrid graphic. These books have portions with panels and illustration like a traditional comic, and significant portions that are text only. They have kind of the best of both worlds. This is a great example. It's Invisible Emmy by Terry Libenson. And this author has written several in this kind of format. They're not exactly in a series, but they're all about characters in the same school. So there's illustrated portions of this book that just have pictures with a lot of text like you would see in an illustrated novel. They also have panels that make it sort of a comic graphic novel hybrid. And I would highly recommend this series loosely for grades 3 or 4 through 7th grade. A lot of parents are concerned that their child might never read novels or nonfiction if they're too into comics. I can't tell you whether your child will ever transition to longer, more text-heavy reading material. A lot of kids will, and a lot of kids will maintain a love for different formats. There are plenty of adults who only read a specific genre like science fiction, but there are also plenty of adults who read across many genres. And graphic novel and nonfiction publishing is so robust right now that even if a kid never reads anything solely text-based, they will still have a full literary life, and that's important to remember. These are a few of the graphic novels and nonfiction that I've recently read that are written for grown-ups. You can see stories can be complex, stories can be deep, they can be light, they can be lots of different things, and you can learn from them. These are a couple examples. They're not just for kids. They're not just for kids who are learning how to read or struggling with reading. It's a whole different art and literary format that anyone can enjoy. So if you haven't read a graphic novel yourself, if you've never really been interested in the format, I would suggest picking up either a kid's book or an adult book and just trying it out and seeing what the experience is like. Because sometimes we don't really understand why our kids like a particular thing, and it helps to understand that experience a little bit from your own perspective. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call the library. We're eager to help you find the right book for your child. And don't forget that you can fill out perfect picks on our website to get personalized book recommendations put on hold for you or for your child. And remember, if your child is reading anything, yay, that's awesome. That's what we want. I hope you enjoyed this segment.